Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. As the countdown to Earth's final hours ticked away, the last Ark stood on the launch pad, a silent sentinel against the backdrop of a dying world. The ship, an engineering marvel of unprecedented scale, was humanity's final hope. Designed to carry the genetic seeds of a new beginning, the Ark held within its steel belly the essence of what had once been the pinnacle of human civilization: art, knowledge, culture, and the finest genetic specimens humanity had to offer. The Ark was not just a ship, it was a promise, a last-ditch effort to ensure that even as Earth succumbed to the ravages of time and human folly, something of humanity would survive. Dr. Evelyn Carter stood at the observation deck, her eyes scanning the massive ship below. Her heart pounded with a mixture of pride and dread. She had been instrumental in designing the Ark's navigation systems, and now, as the moment of truth approached, she couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of responsibility that weighed on her. If anything went wrong, it would be on her shoulders. The world outside was a desolate wasteland, ravaged by environmental collapse and decades of war. The once vibrant cities had crumbled into ruins, now inhabited only by the ghosts of a bygone era. As the final preparations were made, Evelyn's thoughts drifted to the people left behind. The billions who would not be boarding the Ark, who would not have the chance to see a new dawn. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. There was no room for sentimentality now. The Ark's mission was clear, and it was the only hope left. Dr. Carter, we're ready for launch, a voice crackled over the intercom, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Captain Liam Mason, the Ark's commander. A man of few words, Mason had been chosen for this mission because of his unshakable resolve and ability to lead under pressure. Evelyn admired his calm demeanor, even as they stood on the precipice of the unknown. I'll be right there, Evelyn replied, her voice steadied despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. She made her way to the control room, where the rest of the crew was gathered. Captain Mason was already at the helm, his eyes focused on the monitors in front of him. Samantha, Sam Reyes, the young engineer who had been a last-minute addition to the crew, was working furiously at her station, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she ran final checks on the Ark systems. All systems are green, Sam announced, her voice tinged with the excitement and anxiety that only someone so young could exhibit in such a dire situation. Evelyn nodded, her gaze sweeping over the room. The tension was palpable, but so was the determination. This was it. There was no turning back. Let's get this bird in the air, Mason ordered, his voice firm and authoritative. The launch sequence began, the roar of the engines growing to a deafening crescendo as the Ark lifted off the ground. For a moment, everything seemed to go according to plan. The ship soared into the sky, leaving behind the dying planet it was born from. But then, just as quickly, things began to go wrong. An alarm blared, piercing through the control room. The crew exchanged worried glances as Sam's hands flew back to the keyboard, her eyes wide with panic. What is it? Mason demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. There's a problem with the navigation system, Sam replied, her voice strained. We're off course. Evelyn's heart sank. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not after everything they'd done to ensure the Ark's success. She rushed to Sam's side, her mind racing as she scanned the data on the screen. The Ark was veering dangerously close to an asteroid belt, a death trap that would shred the ship into pieces if they didn't correct the course immediately. It's a program error, Evelyn said, her voice tight with fear and frustration. We need to fix this now. The control room erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew scrambled to diagnose the problem. Evelyn and Sam worked side by side, their minds locked in a desperate race against time. The clock was ticking, and every second brought them closer to disaster. This isn't just an error, Sam muttered under her breath as she dug deeper into the code. It looks deliberate. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Deliberate? Sabotage? The implications were staggering. If someone had sabotaged the Ark, it meant there was a traitor among them, someone who believed that humanity didn't deserve a second chance. Who would do this? Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. There's no time to figure that out now, Mason interjected, his voice cutting through the rising panic. We need to fix this. The crew's efforts redoubled, but the situation was growing more dire by the minute. The Ark was hurtling toward the asteroid belt, and if they didn't correct the course soon, all would be lost. The pressure was immense, but Evelyn forced herself to focus. She couldn't afford to think about the saboteur, the billions left behind, or even the impending doom. All that mattered was finding a way to save the Arkansas. We need to reroute the navigation systems manually, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Sam, I need your help. Sam nodded, her face set in determination. Together, they began the painstaking process of bypassing the corrupted code and resetting the Ark's course. The seconds felt like hours as they worked, each keystroke bringing them closer to either salvation or destruction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the system responded. The Ark's course began to correct itself, slowly but surely steering away from the asteroid belt. The tension in the room eased, but only slightly. The immediate danger had passed, but the damage had been done. The Ark's systems were compromised, and there was no telling what other problems they might encounter on their journey. We're not out of the woods yet, Mason said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. We need to figure out who did this and why. And we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. The crew agreed, but the exhaustion was evident in their faces. They had averted disaster, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in grave danger, that the saboteur's plan might not be over. As they regrouped, Sam continued to analyze the code, trying to trace the source of the sabotage. It was a daunting task, made even more difficult by the fact that they were working in a high-stress, high-stakes environment. This code is sophisticated, Sam said after a while, her brow furrowed in concentration. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't the work of an amateur. It was the work of someone with a deep understanding of the Ark systems, someone who had been involved in the project from the beginning. Could it be someone on the crew? Evelyn asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. The room fell silent as the crew exchanged uneasy glances. The possibility was too horrifying to contemplate, but they couldn't ignore it. If there was a traitor among them, it meant that the danger was far from over. We need to stay vigilant, Mason said finally, his voice grim. Until we know who did this, no one is above suspicion. The atmosphere in the control room grew tense as the crew resumed their duties, each of them acutely aware of the growing mistrust. Evelyn's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. Who would want to sabotage the Ark? And why? The stakes were too high for this to be a simple act of rebellion. There had to be more to it. As the Ark continued its journey, Evelyn found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering who among them could be responsible. The sense of unease was almost unbearable, but she forced herself to focus on her work. There was too much at stake to let fear cloud her judgment. Days passed, and the Ark systems remained stable, but the crew's anxiety only grew. Sam continued to work tirelessly, determined to uncover the identity of the saboteur. Evelyn, too, spent every waking moment analyzing the code, looking for any clues that might point to the culprit. Then, just when they thought they might be out of the woods, disaster struck again. A critical system failure sent the Ark into chaos, and once again, they were faced with the terrifying reality that their lives were in the hands of an unknown enemy. "It's happening again," Sam said, her voice trembling with fear. "The same sabotage, but worse this time. They're trying to take us down for good." Evelyn's heart pounded as she realized the gravity of the situation. The saboteur was still among them, and this time, they weren't holding back. The Ark was on the brink of total collapse, and if they didn't act fast, it would all be over. "We need to stop them," Evelyn said, her voice resolute. "We can't let them destroy everything we've worked for." But stopping the saboteur was easier said than done. The crew was spread thin, and every moment counted. The tension in the control room was palpable as they worked to contain the damage, their minds racing to find a solution. As the minutes ticked by, Evelyn felt a growing sense of despair. They were running out of time, and the saboteur was still out there, somewhere on the ship, waiting to strike again. But just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Sam made a breakthrough. "I found something," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "A trace in the code. It leads back to one of the crew members." Evelyn's heart raced as she followed Sam's lead, her eyes scanning the data. There it was, clear as day, a digital fingerprint that pointed to the saboteur's identity. "It's him," Sam said, her voice tinged with shock. "It's Captain Mason." The revelation hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. Captain Mason, the man they had trusted to lead them, was the one behind the sabotage. The thought was almost too much to bear, but the evidence was undeniable. Evelyn exchanged a look with Sam, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They had to act fast, but they had to be careful. Confronting Mason could be dangerous, especially if he was as desperate as they suspected. "We need to neutralize him," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "But we can't let him know that we're onto him. Not until we're ready." Sam nodded, her face set in determination. Together, they devised a plan to take Mason down. It was risky, but they didn't have a choice. The fate of the Ark, and humanity, depended on it. The confrontation came in the dead of night, when the ship was quiet and the crew was resting. Evelyn and Sam approached Mason in the control room, their faces calm but their hearts pounding. "Captain, we need to talk," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Mason looked up from his station, his expression unreadable. "What is it, Dr. Carter?" "We know what you've been doing," Evelyn said, her voice cold. "We know you've been sabotaging the Arkansas." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Mason's expression shifted, his face hardening into a mask of cold resolve. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and menacing. "This mission is a mistake. Humanity doesn't deserve to survive." Evelyn's heart sank as she realized the depth of Mason's conviction. He truly believed that what he was doing was right, that humanity's destructive nature should not be allowed to continue. "We can't let you destroy the Ark," Evelyn said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We have to try. We have to believe that there's still hope." Mason's eyes flashed with anger. "Hope? There is no hope, Dr. Carter. Humanity is doomed, and I'm just speeding up the inevitable." Before Evelyn could react, Mason lunged at her, his hands reaching for her throat. But Sam was quicker. She pulled out a small stun device and pressed it to Mason's side, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. Mason collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Evelyn gasped for breath, her heart racing as she looked down at Mason's motionless form. They had done it. They had stopped him. But the cost had been high, and the wounds would take a long time to heal. As they secured Mason and locked him in the ship's brig, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness. Mason had been a good man, a strong leader. But the weight of the mission had broken him, driven him to do the unthinkable. With Mason neutralized, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage he had caused. It was a daunting task, but they were determined. The Ark's systems were stabilized, and the ship was once again on course. But the journey was far from over. As the Ark sailed through the stars, Evelyn found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The sabotage, the confrontation, the near-total failure of their mission. It had been a harrowing experience, one that had tested them all to their limits, but through it all, they had persevered. They had faced the darkness and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. And now, they had a new course, a new hope. The Ark's journey continued, carrying the last remnants of human civilization toward an uncertain future. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but there was also hope. A hope that, somewhere out there, humanity might find a new beginning. As Evelyn looked out at the vast expanse of space, she felt a sense of peace. They had done all they could, and now it was up to the stars to decide their fate. And so, the last Ark sailed on, a beacon of hope in a galaxy filled with uncertainty. Humanity's final journey had begun, and only time would tell where it would lead.